So, Professor Bojana Čučković has the floor. Please, Bojana.
Thank you, Professor Vujadinović, and apologies at the beginning with the very good afternoon to all of you for being late. We are running a bit late today, but I hope that this won't be the problem and that it won't disturb the agenda for today. So we are continuing with another course, Gender Perspectives of Public International Law, General Public International Law, but we will have a session dedicated to special branches of international law, and the third session will be dealt with gender aspects of EU law. Okay, Tiana, thank you Beatrice, thank you very much for letting us know that there were some problems with the sound. I hope that everything is fine now and that we can officially start with, as I said, another topic for today. And the first one in line is the traditional gender-neutral approach of public international law. So I don't know whether there are some students here who maybe did not attend public international law. Are there any students from first year, second year? No, you are all third year. Yeah, I know that you are first year. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you will have public international law in 2 years. I don't know about our online participants, but we have here students who currently attend public international law, and I hope that this will be very interesting for them, but for all of you as well. So what I wanted to discuss with you today is, first of all, to talk about the gender-neutral origins of public international law. Then we will go through some basic public international law instruments and check to what extent and actually when they started to include certain gender aspects in international public law. And finally, and that I believe would be most interesting, is to see what is the current situation with the most prominent, most powerful, and maybe some less powerful, but still very important international bodies, to see what is their composition currently, what is their mandate when it comes to protecting women's rights, and whether these two issues are actually related. So let me begin with an introduction. So public international law developed from a completely gender-neutral branch of law to a branch of law that actually considers gender. But this development was very slow and very gradual. And one other thing that you will be able to notice, especially after the first two sessions, is that gender perspectives are not equally present within all branches of public international law. There are some branches of public international law that are more gender sensitive than others. But regarding public international law in general, do you have any idea what are the reasons for this gender-neutral origins of public international law and those basic concepts of public international law, as opposed to maybe some more advanced level of introducing gender aspects in certain branches of international law? Any ideas about the reasons? Mladen, please.
Well, the original public international law was not meant to deal with private persons, but states.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Let me just remind you about the very specific nature of public international law. Who are subjects of public international law? States and international organizations, of course, but states who are at the same time creators of the rules of public international law. What are the main sources of public international law? International treaties, and international customary law. How are they made? By the consent of states. When it comes to customary law, also states participate through their acts in forming rules of customary international law. And among states, there are drastic differences. They are not developed to the same extent. They have different backgrounds, different social systems, different religious background, etc., etc. So very diverse group of subjects of international law, which is in a way reflected and is important for the topic that we are to face today. Origins. How did public international law actually develop? Well, first of all, through legal theory. I'm sure that you must have heard about Hugo Grotius. He's considered as father of international law. And here on the slide, you have the book that is usually considered as the very first book written in the area of public international law. By the title, you can guess what was the focus of public international law at its origins. So it is de jure belli ac pacis, about war and peace. So those institutes such as war, peace, states, territory, sovereignty, law of the sea, diplomatic relations, rules regarding conclusion and adoption of international treaties. So those were the basic concepts, basic institutes that public international law first started to deal with and to regulate. And finally, there was international practice, meaning some landmark events, very important events throughout the history that in a way prompted states to start reacting to such events by adopting relevant rules at the international level. So we may say that public international law was a result actually of certain theories and principles in international practice. And the focus back then, as you can see, was not on women. When did women actually come to the fore and into the international arena? Judging on based on these pictures that I provided here on the slide, you can see that some beginnings can be traced to 1888, to the 19th century, actually towards the end of the 19th century, when this International Council of Women was created. Actually, a number of women's organizations gathered in Washington, D.C. to discuss certain issues that are of relevance for them. They gathered from 9 different countries, and they tried to advocate for human rights of women. But that was an informal gathering, or at least outside relevant institutions. When it comes to institutions, the 2 most important international organizations are the League of Nations and the United Nations as its successor. So you can see here on the 2 photos, these 2 photos dating back to 1919 and 1945, they are the photos from the the conferences at which these 2 international organizations were created. What can you see on these photos?
All men.
They're all men. Maybe on this picture in the middle, it appears, at least it seems to me, that there is one lady here towards the left end of the photo, but I'm not sure. However, as you can see, these were actually all ladies. When it comes to the League of Nations and the creation of the League of Nations as the first universal international organization, women's organizations participated at the 12th meeting of the League of Nations Committee at the Peace Conference in Paris. So the committee was charged with drafting the covenant of the League of Nations, and they were invited to participate, but only at a session that was dedicated to the rights of women. And you can see which issues were on the agenda: women's employment rights, prostitution, prison reform, child marriage, trafficking of women and children. And these organizations that were present there, they presented the Women's Charter, which tried to show the importance of separating the nationality of women from their spouses, prohibiting human trafficking of women and girls, and achieving equality of men and women in the area of labor. But that was pretty much it. When it comes to the San Francisco Conference, the conference at which the Charter of the United Nations was adopted and the UN were created, you have here a very striking information that among 800 delegates, only 8 were female. And only one country, this was Great Britain, sent 2 female delegates in their delegation. And they both later on had very successful international careers. Truman appointed Eleanor Roosevelt, I'm sure that you are all familiar with this lady, to be the member of the US delegation towards the end of 1945. And next year, she became the chair of the UN Commission on Human Rights. So one of the bodies, actually the body within the then UN system. This body does not exist anymore. I will come to that later. But the body dedicated to the protection and promotion of human rights. Now that you have this overview about these gender-neutral origins of public international law and the origins of the 2 most important international organizations, let's go to the second issue and discuss the normative structure. So the basic international instruments, let's see to what extent and whether they include gender aspects. So what I will be doing is distinguishing between core public international law instruments. When I say core public international instruments, any idea what do I have in mind? Which instruments? Which is the most important international instrument? Mladen.
United States Charter.
Charter of the United Nations. Yeah, that's right. Before that, we had the Covenant of the League of Nations. I will compare some articles. That's right. Core international human rights law instruments. Some of them we already mentioned yesterday. The Universal Declaration on Human Rights, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, but of course others that are not universal but regional. Then there are some international instruments that focus on women's rights. Any idea regarding that? Something that we also mentioned several times so far. Any ideas? Ivana?
So the Convention Against Discrimination of Women.
That's right.
And also the Istanbul Convention.
That's right. Excellent. And other. What may be other? Mladen.
Convention regarding citizenship of married women.
Sorry? I could not hear you. Sorry.
Convention regarding citizenship of married women.
That's right. But it can also go into the previous category. Other might mean maybe some other hard law instruments that do not focus on the protection of women. Perhaps, for example, let me just give you an example. The Paris Agreement on climate change. Not an international instrument that is focused on women's rights, but there are certain provisions that are gender sensitive because it is claimed that climate change disproportionately affects men and women, for example, or other soft law instruments that are relevance, certain resolutions of some UN bodies that are of relevance in this area. But let's start from the beginning. So the core public international law instruments. I have here on the slide two provisions. Article 7 of the Covenant of the League of Nations and Article 8 of the Charter of the United Nations. Let's read them, and then I would very much like to hear what you think about them and how do you understand them, whether there is any difference actually between them. So Article 7 of the Covenant of the League of Nations provides that all positions under or in connection with the League, including the Secretariat, shall be open equally to men and women. Whereas Article 8 provides of the Charter that the United Nations shall place no restrictions on the eligibility of men and women to participate in any capacity and under conditions of equality in its principal and subsidiary bodies, organs. Do you see any difference here? How do you understand these two provisions of those two international treaties? The League of Nations insisting on all positions under or in connection with the League being open equally to men and women, and the formulation shall place no restrictions on the eligibility. Which is more restrictive? Can you tell? Or do they appear to be, is there any difference between them? Which one do you think appears to be less encouraging with regard to gender parity when it comes to the bodies of these two organizations? No ideas? Sophia, please.
Well, the second one is more discouraging.
Mm-hmm.
To me, the second one is more discouraging because it just says no restrictions, while the first one says equally, so it's like positive enforcement.
Yeah, I would agree with you. Of course, the effects, as you will see, are more or less the same. The formulation did not have any concrete effects in this regard, but yes, which is really unusual to have an instrument adopted later to have more restrictive language. On the other hand, the Covenant of the League of Nations refers to all positions under or in connection with the League, including the Secretariat, meaning anybody, regardless of the status of the body, whereas Article 8 is limited to which bodies? Principal and subsidiary organs. But you know, the UN system is a very complex system. It does not only consist of principal organs and subsidiary organs. There are some other bodies which do not have that status. When it comes to the Charter, I must refer to the preamble, which reaffirms the faith in equal rights of men and women, and also a very important provision, Article 55, which provides that the UN will further commit itself to promote universal respect for human rights without distinction as to sex. On the other hand, when it comes to core international human rights law instruments, do you recognize the lady on the photo? That's right, Mladen. Great, Eleanor Roosevelt. She was very important for the adoption of the Universal Declaration on Human Rights. And just so that you can have an idea what was initially planned to be the content of Article 1, it was supposed to state all men are born free and equal. And later on, due to some lobbying and efforts that were made, it was changed to all human beings are born free and equal. Of relevance is, of course, Article 2 of the Universal Declaration, which provides to everyone all rights without distinction, among others, to sex. Article 16 proclaims equality of spouses. Article 25, paragraph 2, protects motherhood. There are some other articles that are, of course, relevant for the topic that we have today, but we don't have time to mention them. On the other hand, the two covenants, the two 1966 covenants, one on civil and political rights and one on economic, social, and cultural rights, maybe the most striking, the most relevant are Articles 2 and 3. Basically, the formulations are the same in these two treaties. Article 2 of both treaties states that states parties will respect and guarantee everyone within their jurisdiction all rights without distinction of any kind, including sex, whereas Article 3 provides for the states to guarantee equal rights of men and women to the enjoyment of all civil and political rights. Of course, this relates to the Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, whereas the Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights also demand states to provide, to guarantee equal rights of men and women to the enjoyment of economic, social, and cultural rights. The documents that we mentioned yesterday, those that focus on women's rights, a very important one, the 1967 Declaration on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, which was later on, from which actually was born the very important 1979 Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. CEDAW, we will deal with CEDAW again, I suppose later on, but during the spring school also. But what I wanted, and we mentioned some provisions of CEDAW, so I won't go into details there, but just take a look at Article 7, which is very important for what I will be discussing later on in this second part of the session, dealing with presence of women in relevant international bodies and institutions. Article 7 provides that women's equality must be implemented in public and political life, enabling their participation in non-governmental organizations and associations and securing a more active role in international organizations and state delegations. Because, as you know, states are presented in international organizations through their delegations. So this is something that Article 7 proclaims. And the last category, the one other, there were some instruments that are not, of course, treaty law. These are other kinds of instruments, but the one that I think is very important, and we have to at least mention it, the Women, Peace and Security Resolution 1325, which is a global effort to establish a platform on which to base national and international policies with the aim of ensuring protection of women and girls during and after conflict. You will deal later on with gender sensitiveness of international humanitarian law, the law of armed conflict, equal participation in all efforts of women and girls in the maintenance of peace and security, mainstreaming of gender perspectives in peace operations, and implementation of specialized training for all personnel deployed in affected areas. Now, let me ask you a question. Which international organ do you perceive as being the most powerful? Mladen.
Security Council.
Yeah, that's right. So one of the main bodies of the UN, definitely, the one which is consisted of a rather limited number of states. Members of the Security Council do not have equal status. There are some who are permanent members, some who are non-permanent members. Their voting rights differ as well. But let me ask you another question. How many women do you think are there currently in the Security Council? Here you have the current members of the Security Council. So I'm sure that you all know which countries are permanent members of the UN Security Council: China, France, Russian Federation, the United Kingdom, and the United States of America. On the other side of the slide, you have non-permanent members, the actual non-permanent members. But between these 15 countries, how many representatives are women? Do you have any idea?
6.
Less?
4.
4, Natasha. Yeah, that's right. 4. And can you maybe guess from which countries they come? Because let me remember, just stress that states are the ones who are members of the UN Security Council, and they are free to appoint whoever they wish to be their ambassador in the UN, the one that will be present at the meetings of the UN Security Council. But any ideas which countries have currently, at the current moment, of course this may change, this changes regularly, but at the current moment, which countries? Or maybe you have an idea which countries for sure are not presented by women?
I think maybe the United Kingdom has some, but I'm pretty sure that China doesn't have any.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's sort of my gut feeling.
The United Kingdom, great. They have a lady currently representing them.
Yes, I would say France, maybe.
Not at the moment.
Russia, definitely.
No,
not.
definitely not. You wanted to add something?
Probably the United States.
The United States, yeah. Among the permanent members, those are the two. So the United Kingdom and the United States of America. And among non-permanent members, so we have 2 left. No ideas?
Professor, we have one comment in the chat.
Brazil, Tiana, thank you, Brazil. No, it's not Brazil. It's not Brazil. No. Would you say that United Arab Emirates are currently presented by a lady? No, never, but they are, just imagine, very, I read her CV in order to prepare for this because I was curious to see what is the background, the profile of a woman that managed to come from United Arab Emirates. You might be familiar about the position of women there, but she managed to become the UN ambassador of this country. And the other one is Switzerland. So the only 2, the rest are all male. So what I wanted to show you, and I will continue showing you, so the UN Security Council is perceived as the most powerful, the most important UN body. You can see how many women they are, whether they are represented or not. Which is the body that you perceive as a personification of the UN? When you think about the UN, there is one person that represents the organization. Who is that? The Secretary General. Mm-hmm. Who is the current Secretary General of the UN? The fact that nobody knows, maybe
is he Spanish?
I think he's from Portugal.
It's all I know. Spain or Portugal.
Antonio Guterres, yes. Angela, thank you. I see Angela's answer in the chat. Guterres, that's right. And take a look on this slide. Again, any female, any woman? No. And, we cannot say that the history of the UN is a short history. They exist for more than 70 years, 75 years. And we had, until this moment, 9 persons being appointed Secretary General of the UN, and they were all men. Now, I don't know whether you followed the elections that happened in 2016. I'm sure that some of these faces are familiar to you. You all recognize Vuk Jeremić. He was one of the candidates. Maybe the gentleman here as well. We have the opportunity to see him on the TV very often when he comes to visit our officials, Miroslav Lajček. But there were two other ladies that were considered as very strong candidates back in 2016 when the UN Secretary General was elected. And this was considered to be the historical opportunity to have finally a woman being appointed as the UN Secretary General. Among 13 candidates, 7 were women. You can find some statements, some estimates, some assessments that most of them, and some of them actually, were even more experienced, more skilled than the current Secretary General. I will not go into those details. But Ban Ki-moon, the predecessor of Antonio Guterres, he said, and I quote, "It is high time for a female head after more than 70 years of the UN and 8 male leaders." And then we got the results. So even though there were some ladies, especially the one from Bulgaria, Irina Bokova, who was seen as the strongest candidate, someone who had very good chances to become first female Secretary General. However, this did not happen, and there were some reactions that this was a disaster for gender equality. And I have here for you two statements coming from two candidates. Susana Malcorra from Argentina. She was Argentina's foreign minister. She said women did not have a chance in the Security Council. Gender remains an issue in the election of a Secretary General. Whereas Helen Clark from New Zealand said, if you're asking whether women are being discriminated against, no. There are a lot of factors swirling around. There is East-West, there is North-South, there is the style of what's wanted in the job. Do they want strong leadership? Do they want someone who can easily be influenced? So it's all across cutting, and we don't know what will come in the wash. Any comment regarding these statements? Who do you agree with? Mrs. Malcorra or Clark? Any ideas? Please.
I don't agree with Clark because I think even though she says that basically women are not explicitly being discriminated against, I still believe that perhaps the certain characteristics that are wanted for the position of a Secretary General are maybe traditionally considered male. So I think that it is a really big shame that there was not a women general secretary, because it kind of sets an example, because at the beginning we see some, maybe it looks as if everything's equal, and then so they can say, oh yeah, we had the equal elections, but the women were not competent enough to win against men. So I think it is quite a dangerous precedent, because we know how important in general, like the UN is in general. So yeah, I think it does set kind of a really bad example, and I think it is discrimination. Maybe not a very visible one, but yeah, it definitely is.
Yeah. Although there is always politics behind, because we are talking about the UN system. You know, the UN Secretary General is elected, among others, by the UN Security Council. So those most powerful states, they want to have someone who they can cooperate with. So this is there is truth even in the statement of Helen Clark. But let's wait for some future elections for the female candidate to be elected at this position. And now that we leave those most important, let's say, in UN bodies, there is another one, which is, of course, very important. It is a main body, principal body of the UN, but with quite different mandate, with the mandate to promote social, economic progress, health issues, human rights without discrimination based on race, sex, language, or religion. And there you have, as the president, a lady. This lady that you can see on the slide is Her Excellency Lashezara Stoeva. Just you're starting to I suppose, understand that as we are distancing ourselves from those most important bodies, or the ones that actually create global politics, where we have dominantly men representatives of states, when it comes to these other bodies that I will now go to, you will see that the percentage of women and the positions that they hold in those other bodies differs as opposed to the first category. The Economic and Social Council is a very important, of course, body for because of the mandate that it has. However, it has different subsidiary bodies, and one of the subsidiary bodies, there are some regional commissions, some technical commissions, so either those that deal with specific region in the world or with some specific topic. But one of the subsidiary bodies of the ECOSOC is Commission on the Status of Women. And I will just briefly go through it. It has 45 member states. It was established already in 1946 as the principal global intergovernmental body with the aim to promote gender equality. And it discusses the 1995 Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action as the most comprehensive global policy agenda for the empowerment of women. This platform actually covers 12 areas of concern, just to give you an idea how diverse these areas of concern are when it comes to the empowerment of women. It's about poverty, education, health, violence, armed conflict, environment, media, the girl child, economy, power and decision making, human rights in general. Those are the topics on the agenda of the Commission on the Status of Women. Now, another subsidiary body within the UN mandate, also the most important one when it comes actually to protecting human rights, it's the UN. It was the UN Commission on Human Rights, which became Human Rights Council. So today it is called the Human Rights Council. 47 member states are there, and it has at its disposal different mechanisms. There is a complaint procedure for situations in which there are alleged widespread and systemic human rights violations in a certain country. Just to give you an example, the Human Rights Council dealt with and focused on human rights of women with regard to Eritrea, where it examined different human rights violations, including violence against women. It can hold special sessions dedicated to specific topics relating to women. For example, the special session on situation in Darfur, where gender inequality and sexual violence in relation to Democratic Republic of Congo, and something which is very important, the special procedures. A special rapporteur for violence against women, for example, exists. This is the lady that you can see, or not, I have to move the chat. So the lady that you can see here on the slide is actually the special rapporteur on violence against women. Her task is to examine this specific issue, to deliver certain reports, recommendations, conclusions, and to contribute to enhancing, of course, the protection of rights with this particular topic. There is a universal periodic review, very important one, but I will not go into details there. Other entities, UN entities that focus on women's rights, UN Women, It was created in 2010 by the General Assembly. Its full title is the United Nations Entity for Gender Equality and the Empowerment of Women. It serves as, in a way, of support to member states when they design laws, policies, programs, services which are necessary to ensure that women participate equally in all aspects of life. And it also serves as a secretariat to the UN Commission on the Status of Women. And currently, this lady, which is also Deputy Secretary General, Under-Secretary General of the United Nations, is currently acting as the Executive Director of UN Women. I think, Professor Vujadinović, that we cooperated with them within this LOGEM project. They supported some of our activities, so you can see the wide variety of different activities that this entity
Conference
offers.
on Disability.
The Conference on Disability. And last but not least, what is curious with this photo?
Only one man. As I can see.
Only one man. Yeah. Any idea which body is this? Yeah, Costa, thank you. Only one man, yeah. Any idea which of, we mentioned this body yesterday, today, no, not today yet, but yesterday.
A comment in the chat.
Sido, Angela, great, Sido. I deliberately left the chat box here so that those who are in the room cannot see Secretary Sido to make you this task more difficult to you. So Sido, the committee that oversees the implementation of the convention, UN Convention on the elimination of discrimination against women. So the most important UN treaty body. So this is a UN treaty body. Please make note of this. It was created by the convention and it supervises the implementation of the convention, how the contracting states implement this convention. So what you can see from these this brief outline of different bodies that we have at the universal level, at the level of the United Nations, and those bodies who are very closely connected to the United Nations, is that when you are distancing from those most political ones, most influential ones, and slowly going towards those bodies who are dealing with human rights, especially with women's rights, the percentage of women that are members of those bodies increases. And last but not least, the International Court, the World Court. The International Court of Justice as the principal judicial body in the United Nations. How are judges to the ICJ appointed? What's the procedure? Who appoints them? Not directly. So states do not appoint them directly, but of course they have means to.
No, I thought members of the judiciary.
No. Those who took public international law. Sophia, Natasha, Jovana, I'm looking at you. Sorry?
Something to do with arbitration.
With the Permanent Court of Arbitration, with national groups that parties to, the permanent parties to the convention that created the Permanent Court of Arbitration have before the Permanent Court of Arbitration. That's right. So those persons, and they are experts, so the members of the national groups coming from different states, they are experts, and they are to nominate candidates to the ICJ. And then they are elected by whom? So this is the nomination process, but the judges are elected again by the two most important UN bodies, the Security Council and the General Assembly together. Fine. How many judges are there in the ICJ? 15, that's right. And do you have any idea how many of them are women?
I'm sure there are few.
There are few. Yeah. Just let me remind you that there are two. The judges may have the status of permanent judges. These are these 15. And then you have ad hoc judges that state parties in the dispute, in the proceedings before the court may nominate. I won't go into details when they can do that, but there are ad hoc judges for a particular dispute. Any women presidents of the court?
Yes.
Yes.
I've got named but in cases.
That's right. She was the one to read the judgment. Yeah. Rosalind Higgins. Great, Mladen. That's right. So you have here the numbers, and they are really, to say the least, striking. So in the history of the court, there were 106 male judges, only 5 female judges in total. We had 2 female presidents of the ICJ, and that's the lady that Mladen mentioned, Dame Rosalind Higgins. And have a look at this year, 1995. 1995 was the year when the first woman was elected a judge of the ICJ. It's the lady that you can see here on the photo. I have these chat and other boxes covering her photo, but yeah, that's the lady. And in 2006, she became the first female president of the court. Regarding ad hoc judges, the figures are also very disappointing. Only 2 female ad hoc judges at the moment, with 4 former ad hoc judges that were women. So this is the current composition of the ICJ. How many women do you see are members of the court at the moment? You cannot see it. Yeah.
Možeš da sklanjaš koliko hoćeš.
4. Diana says 5, so you cannot see who is male, who is female. Yeah, you have Joan Donahue, currently also the president of the ICJ. She is the U.S. judge. Then we have Julia Sebutinde. We have Xu Hanshin, if I'm pronouncing her surname or name correctly, I'm not sure, and Hilary Charlesworth from Australia. So, and in the history of the ICJ, this is the highest number of female judges in the among the permanent judges of the ICJ. Whether that suggests something or not, I don't know. But what we have now for you is some materials that we prepared for you to read. So please go to the Moodle platform. I would kindly ask those who are following online to do the same. So visit the Moodle platform, and there we posted a link with a text. Actually, it is an interview with the 3 female judges. The first one, Rosalind Higgins, coming from the Great Britain, the Chinese judge whose name I would not dare to pronounce again. Again, yeah. And the Australian judge, Hilary Charlesworth. So they were asked a couple of questions regarding gender parity before the ICJ and how they perceive their role as a judge, as a woman judge, and whether they faced some difficulties in becoming judges of the ICJ. So please be so kind to, yes, Mladen.
Question. Were there any women in the Permanent Court of International Justice, the predecessor court?
I'm not aware of any, but we can check. I don't think so, but we can check. No. No. So take a couple of minutes to read this interview, and then we are curious to hear your comments. So I hope that that was enough time. To read it wasn't that long. Mladen, did you read that? You don't have the phone?
No, I'm gadget free today.
Oh, okay, great. Then you'll catch up later. Okay. Mladen, because you don't have this, you should have told me earlier. I have here some excerpts from the interview on this slide, so you can also have a look if you want. But generally, what we wanted to hear from you is first any comments. Those who are online, you can also either turn on your microphone and speak or write in the chat. We have something in the chat. Xenia says, despite the fact that women are represented as judges, it took too long to achieve this. And despite this, women have to work hard and sometimes do more to justify trust. Not always, but this continues to exist despite the fact that we seem to have achieved equality. The gender division is still making itself felt. Definitely. Anything that these ladies said that maybe left... Diana? Something else? Okay.
For me, it was very interesting to notice that they're very putting the point on the education of the new female lawyers. And they're saying that it is necessary for the court to have female judges and to secure the future of female judges in the position in the court, because it also gives a very good other perspective of the cases, and also it is important for the states to secure the positions for the new female judges. So it's also from point of education to the point of applying new judges.
That's great, Tiana. Excellent comment. And I think that one of the answers, if I'm not mistaken, Judge Dame Rosalind Higgins pointed to this aspect that you raised, so education of girls and women as the most important one. And if you read their biographies, I think that they actually studied law at prestigious, the most important law faculties in the world. So education is definitely one of the factors. What is the other factor that Judge Higgins raised? Do you remember? Education was the second, actually. And the first one?
I think it was the states,
that's
and
right.
The national solutions, and the way nations kind of attack the issue of gender equality. And I think even Ms. Hilary Charlesworth also kind of accentuated the same issue, that it is about the states, that's kind of the first instance that they need to first take that step towards achieving the parity in general. But I also think it was quite interesting how their views differ.
That's
I
right.
think Dame Rosalind Higgins, she kind of doesn't put that, she doesn't accentuate the fact that she was a woman played such a significant role. And I think that's very interesting and also very important, because the female question is very individual. And I think just the whole feminist movement has always been so fragmented because some women perceive gender to be an issue while some don't. And I think that's what kind of also is one of the biggest issues because they perceive it very individually and everyone has such different individual experiences relating to gender. It kind of does affect the overall solution.
Yeah, that's a great remark.
Bojana, can I interrupt here? What can be the reason for that?
I think it is individual, as in it comes from individual privilege.
Microphone. Okay.
I think individual privilege. So we cannot compare for instance, the experience of white women that grew up in relatively privileged areas, or for instance, maybe more like rich households, and comparing African American women, for instance, or any, for fact, women of color that had to endure other types of discrimination that white women didn't have to. But then again, it also depends on a lot of factors. I think, for instance, the judge that is Asian definitely had to experience some sort of holdback because of her race. So yeah, I think.
It's a very good point, as what Professor Čučković said. They all come from very prestigious faculties. For example, Rosalind Higgins, she went to Oxford or Cambridge.
And Harvard.
Harvard and
Yeah.
Yale.
Yale.
School of Economics, so very prestigious faculties. At the same time, she is married to a person who is barren, so they also have a title in the UK. So they definitely come from a very privileged group in Great Britain. And what she said, and you saw this quote, that she's not for the gender parity. She said that it's really not important who is who, that we need to have the best quality of people who work in this kind of institutions. Do you agree with this argument, that the gender parity is not an important issue? Mladen, maybe it will be easier for you to sit for
physical exercise. My professional experience is not. I used to work in public institution with 85% women. And we have that issue about two candidates, one male, one female. I was opposed to get male because I considered female candidate much more suited for the position than male. Why just to accept male candidate because he's minority? Vice versa applies too. And one more comment. We talk about Swiss representative to United Nations Council, Security Council. Also, we have to be reminded that Switzerland was the last nation in Europe to give women a right to vote in 1974, I think. So we cannot presume that all white women are privileged.
Of course, and you're totally right, but it's also important to have the access to this position. So this is what we discussed yesterday. And in a situation when we have access, which is secured, then it becomes a non-important issue. But if you do not have access, and if you do not consider women as capable as men to do the job, then it is problematic. For example, if you take a look, you looked, and thank you, Professor Čučković, for this excellent presentation, that you led us to the composition of this primarily UN bodies and the International Court of Justice. But if you take a look of regional courts, for example, we have, and take the composition of the European Court of Human Rights. Is there anyone who knows how many women we have appointed currently? How many female judges?
Do they know how many judges in general?
Do you know how many judges
in total
we have in total at the courts?
46.
How many?
46.
46. And how many female judges? What do you think?
12.
12?
Well,
you're very close. 17, so it's 15. So we have 15 compared to 31. We have the first president of the court elected recently, I think 2 or 3 months ago, something like that, maybe 5, yeah. But it's really recently. What is interesting, for the selection of the candidates because the state provides the list of 3 candidates. So it's a little bit different than for other courts. Before 2004, when we didn't have a resolution of one body within the Council of Europe scheme, we didn't have female candidates. But they said, okay, now it's time that you have to have at least one candidate of less represented sex. We started to get women in the court. So we need to get support. And what Higgins said, for her, it's not an issue. It's not an issue in countries where you have access to these jobs, in some countries where you do not have that, and you can find, for example, and it's really an amazing thing because Professor Čučković really, she inspired me to do the research while she was talking. For example, if you take a look of some countries concerning the European Court of Human Rights, we will find that, for example, we have out of 46 countries, for 18, we never had women elected. So it's Albania, Andorra, Azerbaijan, Cyprus, France, Greece, Hungary, Iceland, Italy, Liechtenstein, Lithuania, Luxembourg, Poland, Russian Federation. Russian Federation is not on the list anymore, so it's 17. Serbia, Slovenia, Turkey, and the United Kingdom. So you have a very diverse list of countries. So it's really an interesting discussion. And then coming to the issue of parity, do you think that having more women in the composition of this court, that it makes sense, that it makes difference? What do you think?
Well, definitely it has some impact because other women or young girls who are aspired to be lawyers, to be judges, they are more likely to be, yesterday we spoke about ambition, but it's not about ambition, it's about encouragement of women to apply for these jobs because they already have this ambition, they are working hard, they are trying harder, and they have to prove themselves every time in many situations. So when they see that the process is changing and that it is not, as we see here, very slow, and when they see that more women are in these high positions, they are more likely to be encouraged to aspire and to be in that kind of. And also we mentioned, Professor Čučković mentioned these opportunities and development in the school education. And not only is it important to educate young girls, but also young boys who are also need to know that women are in the same line with them concerning future opportunities.
What do you think about other regional courts? We still have two other courts, like Inter-American Court for Human Rights and also African Court for Human Rights. What do you think about the parity, the gender parity in those two additional courts?
I think the representation of women in all of these courts kind of gives a bittersweet answer, because I agree, on one hand, it is amazing, and obviously women should be even more represented. It gives encouragement to young girls, and it shows that it is possible. But I don't think it should be normal at this point. It's been somewhere in certain parts of this world, like in America, it's been a century since women got the right to vote. So how is it 100 years later that we still look at like having 5 women in one court as it's something revolutionary? It shouldn't be. So I think it also only shows that such a small percentage of women have their voices heard. And what about the other 99% that still basically do not have, in certain aspects, don't have basic human rights?
We can agree with your argument, but it's not the answer to my question. What do you think? Any guess?
Maybe Africa will have a hard time to achieve parity, mainly because they are highly traditional.
So out of 11 judges, we have, what do you think? How many women?
1.
Good. What about the Inter-American Court for Human Rights? Any guess? We have 7 judges in total, so what do you think about the parity?
Maybe 3 judges, perhaps.
Very good. So we have 3 female judges currently. Very good. So almost we have, of course, it's not possible to have equal number of judges when we have salmon. So we can say that the court almost achieved gender parity. And what about the African court? It's not one. Any other guess?
0 maybe.
Okay, so we are all at the same line. There are 6 female judges. So this is the only court which has, at the moment, more female judges than male judges. Can we also draw any conclusion from this? Hmm? Hmm? You're so shocked. So no conclusion. Do we have any comment in the chat box?
No,
No?
not yet. No.
Not yet. Nothing to conclude.
Mladen.
Mladen?
So we Europeans and Westerners talk too much but work too less.
Okay, that's a good point. It's a good point, but it can also lead us to another conclusion. Any guess? Talking about the importance of these courts, which is the most important court? I mean, among all that we mentioned, including the ICJ that was mentioned by Professor Čučković, which is the most important and the most relevant for the development of International Court of Justice. Then, when we speak about the jurisprudence and the influence of other regional courts, we can say that the next level is the European Court of Human Rights. Then we come to the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, and finally we come to the African Court. So that can be one of the conclusions that we can draw, and I totally agree with you that we also need to take a look at the jurisprudence and to see the influence of women sitting in the bench, because it does not mean necessarily that we will have a more feminist approach in those bodies which have more female judges. But what I think when you compare what these 3 judges said, can we also guess anything about their family status, whether they are married, whether they have children? What do you think? What was your sense when you read what I said and what they referred to, what they focused to? What you will say? Did you have any guess? Did you thought about it at all? Not really. But okay, now when we force you to leave, is there any guess? Do we have any of these 3 judges that is not married, or maybe married without children?
I will have some lucky guesses. One is divorced, maybe, without kids. One is got married a bit later and have 1 kid, and third one have 2 kids and happily married.
Okay, who?
Which one?
Which one?
Higgins maybe is divorced.
Is the worst meaning that she's not married?
Divorced.
No, she's
Divorced.
divorced? Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Any other guess? Who speaks about the work-life balance?
I think that maybe Judge Hue is married because she speaks about child rearing, so family responsibilities. But Dame Higgins, I think even if she was married, she probably is rich enough to have a child, to have nannies maybe. And I probably think that Hillary Charlesworth is not married. So maybe.
Yeah, that's something that the 2 of us wanted to guess. We tried to find their family background information. Unfortunately, for the Chinese judge, we had no luck. So we do not know whether she is married or has any children. Unfortunately, we do not understand Chinese. And those websites in English with her CV, it does not say anything about that.
I didn't understand, colleague. How do you mean worst?
Divorce.
Yeah. No. However, when it comes to the Australian judge, Hilary Charlesworth, she appears to have at least one daughter. That's what we found. She's a grandmother already. She has a grandchild. For Dame Rosalind Higgins, who was maybe, what's the word that we can use for her? Maybe less open to the issue of gender parity, and simply refused to acknowledge that there were any problems that she faced in order to become the ICJ judge. If you remember, and this is there in this slide, the only problem she had is that they had to make a special restroom for her, because until that moment, can you imagine, until that moment there was no restroom for women in the ICJ building. Anyway, she, as Professor Krstić says, she is, I think, happily married, not divorced, and she has 2 children, a son and a daughter. Yeah, so this maybe comes as a surprise. For some, maybe not, but yeah, that's something that we wanted to hear from you.
But yes, it depends definitely on the social background. So if she must be coming from a really high social status, she has all the support that she needs in order to pursue her career. So that's a really huge issue. And then we turn back to intersectionality issues, so gender, class, everything. So for her, whether she had 5, 1 kid, unmarried, it's really not that big issue.
Professor, we have one comment about the Chinese judge saying that she is married and has 1 girl.
Oh, we have Chinese participants. Great.
Thank you for the information.
Thank you for the information for the Chinese judge. Great.
And yes, also, I'm sure that all women here are annoyed by the question, how do you balance private and professional life? And it's often asked for a woman that, and we never ask men that question. So it's also related to this.
Good point. Do you have any additional comment to this discussion that we had?
Yes, I actually wanted to add that Finland is considering actually men with regard to this work-life balance, and they're like, it's now mandatory that men take parental leave because they acknowledge the need for a father to be with the kid and to acknowledge that he needs rest and his peace, so they're kindly setting example for that. So yeah, that's just one thing.
Nothing else? We can conclude. Okay, so if there are no additional comments, then we suggest to conclude this part of the session. We decided to attach the discussion to this first session, so there won't be the discussion workshop at the end. That's why we will make a break now. 15 minutes, Professor?
15, but coffee is not prepared because I said, but never mind, I will tell now.
We will tell them, to prepare.
Okay, I will do that now.
And after the break, you have another 2 sessions, one dealing with specific branches of international law, and at the end, the one dealing with EU law and gender aspects of EU law. Thank you for your attention.